In the twilight of Middle-earth, where starlight wove silver threads through ancient forests, a figure wandered. His cloak gray as the mist fluttered in the breeze, and his staff tapped softly against the earth's heartbeat. Thud, thud, a rhythm older than the hills. To the hobbits of the Shire he was, Gandalf the bringer of fireworks, whose laughter warmed their hearths like a summer's noon. To the elves of Rivendell he was Mithrandir, the grey pilgrim, a spirit of wisdom cloaked in mortal guise, his eyes sharp as the moon. But few knew his true name. Olorin, a Maya, born of the thought of Eru Ilúvatar, the one who sang the world into being before time had a name. Long before the Third Age, Olorin stood among the Valar, the guardians of Arda in the undying lands of Valinor. His hands helped shape the mountains that cradled Middle-earth. His voice joined the melodies that birthed its seas. Yet his heart turned not to stone or wave, but to the children of Ilúvatar, men with their fleeting dreams, elves with their ancient sorrows, dwarves with their stubborn fire, and hobbits with their quiet, unyielding courage. He walked among them in spirit unseen, delighting in their joys, weeping for their losses, a guardian who loved the small as fiercely as the great. When Sauron's shadow stirred anew, a darkness creeping from Mordor's ashes, the Valar gathered in council. The One Ring forged in the fires of Mount Doom had vanished after Isildur's fall, but its malice lingered, whispering of its master's return. The Valar chose not to wield their might directly. Such was not their way in this age. Instead, they sent 5 Istari wizards veiled in flesh to guide Middle-earth's free peoples against the growing storm. Gandalf was among them, chosen not for the raw power of Saruman or the lore of Radagast, but for his love of the humble, his spark of hope that flickered in the darkest hours. He came to Middle-earth as an old man, his beard white as frost, his laughter rich as the Shire's harvest. He roamed from Lindon's wave-kissed shores to Gondor's stone towers, never lingering, never claiming power. In the Shire he puffed pipe smoke with hobbits, delighting in their tales of gardens, feasts, and the perfect mushroom pie. Soft as butter, he chuckled, leaning back in a hobbit hole's armchair, yet tough as tree roots when the need arises. Their resilience intrigued him, a strength hidden beneath their love of comfort, like a seed waiting for spring. In Bree he shared ale with men, their voices rough with tales of bandits and whispers of a shadow in the east. In Eriador he walked with rangers, Aragorn among them, teaching them to read the stars and trust their hearts. In Rivendell he counseled Elrond, whose eyes held the weight of ages, and Galadriel, whose mirror saw truths Gandalf dared not name. His wanderings were not aimless. They were a tapestry, each step a thread in a design he could only half see, guided by a hand greater than his own. Gandalf sensed Sauron's return long before the world did. The One Ring, lost for centuries, hummed with malice, its whereabouts unknown. In Erebor he stood before the lonely mountain where Smaug's fire glowed like a wound. A dragon in Sauron's service could burn the north to ash, a calamity Middle-earth could not withstand. So Gandalf wove a plan subtle as the wind. He found Thorin Oakenshield, a dwarf king consumed by loss, and kindled his dream of reclaiming Erebor. "You need a burglar," Gandalf said, his eyes twinkling. "I know just the hobbit." Bilbo Baggins, round and reluctant, stood in his bag-end doorway, clutching his waistcoat. "Adventure me," he stammered, his Tookish blood stirring despite his protests. Gandalf's laughter was gentle but firm. "You'll do nicely, Master Baggins." That small choice rippled outward, a stone cast into a still pond. Bilbo joined. Thorin's quest faced trolls, goblins, and a creature called Gollum in a dark cave. There, by chance or fate, he found the One Ring, a shadow. Gandalf could not yet name its weight, a mystery even to him. Years later, in Rivendell's halls, Gandalf stood beside another hobbit, Frodo, whose hand trembled as he offered the ring to the council. "I will take it," Frodo said, his voice small but steady. Gandalf's heart ached for. He saw the burden's cost. "Bilbo was meant to find it," he murmured, "and you, Frodo, were meant to carry it." His voice was soft, but his eyes keen as starlight saw a design beyond mortal sight, a thread woven by Eru's hand. Gandalf's role was to kindle courage, not to wield power. He advised Elrond, rallied Aragorn, and shaped the Fellowship of the Ring. Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Boromir, each a piece in a greater game. Yet as they ventured south, a shadow loomed in the deep places of the world. The mines of Moria, ancient and forsaken, held a terror older than Sauron, a fire that burned before the stars were kindled. Gandalf's heart grew heavy, his staff's light dimming in the chill. What force could stand against such a storm? What light could endure the fall that awaited? His path had always been one of guidance, of sparking hope in others. Hobbits who faced dragons, men who stood against shadow. But in Moria, Gandalf would face a trial that would burn away the gray and forge something new. The Fellowship crossed a narrow bridge, their breaths sharp in the dark. The earth trembled, and a roar like a furnace echoed. The gray pilgrim turned his staff raised, ready to meet the fire that would change him forever. The mines of Moria lay silent, their stone halls carved by dwarven hands now cloaked in shadow, a tomb for dreams long forgotten. The Fellowship crept through their footsteps, echoing like a heartbeat in the dark, thud, thud, a pulse of fear. Gandalf's staff glowed faintly, a star in the gloom casting light on walls etched with runes that whispered of Khazad-dûm's glory. His heart was heavy, for he sensed a presence ancient and felt a fire that burned before the world was young. The Balrog of Morgoth, a demon of flame and shadow, stirred in the depths, its malice a weight on his soul. Drums thundered a rhythm of doom. Orcs fled their shrieks, swallowed by a roar that shook the stone. To the bridge, Gandalf cried, his voice cutting through the panic. The Fellowship ran their breaths ragged, their swords glinting in the staff's pale light. Frodo clutched the ring, its chill biting his fingers. Sam's eyes darted, seeking danger. Aragorn's blade was steady, but his heart raced. The air grew hot, thick with the scent of ash. Pippin stumbled, and Merry pulled him up, their faces pale as moonlight. At the bridge of Khazad-dûm, narrow and ancient, Gandalf turned. The chasm yawned below a maw of darkness. "Fly, you fools!" he roared, his voice. A crack of thunder. The Balrog loomed, its whip of fire lashing the air, its wings of shadow swallowing the light. Its eyes burned like furnaces, its roar a challenge to the heavens. Frodo's cry pierced the din. Gandalf. But the wizard stood firm, staff and sword ablaze. Glamdring, forged in Gondolin's lost days, gleamed blue, a star against the demon's fire. "You shall not pass!" Gandalf bellowed, his voice shaking the stone. He struck his staff, and light erupted, a barrier of will. The Balrog lunged, its whip coiling like a serpent. The bridge shattered beneath its weight, stone crumbling into the abyss. Gandalf stood unyielding, but the whip ensnared his ankle, pulling him toward the edge. Frodo screamed, lunging forward, but Aragorn held him back. Man and demon plummeted, a spiral of fire and light swallowed by the dark. The Fellowship wept. Their guide lost their hope, snuffed out like a candle. Aragorn led them onward, his jaw set, but Frodo's eyes lingered on the chasm, searching for a spark that was no more. The air grew cold, the light dim, and Moria's silence pressed like a shroud. Outside, under Lothlorien's golden boughs, Galadriel's mirror would show Frodo a glimpse of shadow, but no sign of Gandalf. The world felt emptier, its heart broken. Gandalf's battle, though, had only begun. Through chasms of stone, jagged and endless, they fell claw and flame against staff and will. The Balrog's fire scorched his flesh, a furnace of rage. Gandalf's light pierced its heart, a beacon of defiance. Down they plunged into a pool of icy water that quenched the demon's flames, its roar stifled in the deep. The cold bit Gandalf's bones, but his spirit burned unyielding. Up they climbed through the endless stair, a spiral of torment carved into Moria's heart. Each step was a test, each blow a prayer. The stair wound upward, thousands of steps, a path no mortal could endure. Gandalf's breath rasped his body frail, but his will was iron. The Balrog's shadow clung, its malice a weight that sought to crush him. At last they reached Zaraxigil's peak, high above the clouds, where the sky tore open in storm. Lightning danced as Gandalf struck, his voice rising like a hymn. The Balrog's flames surged, a furnace reborn, but Gandalf's light was a star unquenchable. With a cry that shook the heavens, he cast the demon down. Its fire snuffed out on the mountainside, a shadow broken at last. The peak trembled, ice and stone shattering in the storm's fury. Victory was bitter. Gandalf's body broke, his breath stilled. For days he lay under the stars, a flicker of light fading his form, a husk on the cold stone. The Fellowship mourned. Middle-earth reeled, and Sauron's shadow grew unchecked. Yet in that silence a question lingered. Could even a Maya's spirit endure such a fall? What force could bring light back from such darkness? Share your thoughts. What does Gandalf's sacrifice mean to you? a stand against shadow at the cost of all he was. For in the quiet of Xaraxagil, a greater power stirred its gaze fixed on the broken wizard. The flames of Moria had burned away the gray, but a new light was kindling ready to rise from the ashes of sacrifice. On Xaraxagil's peak, where wind sang of ancient sorrows, Gandalf lay still. His light dimmed his form, a shadow of the Maya. He once was broken by the Balrog's fire. Snow dusted his gray cloak, now tattered, and the stars above seemed distant, their light cold. Middle-earth trembled. Saruman had fallen to greed, his staff bent to Sauron's will. Radagast had lost himself to the wilds, his heart turned to beasts. The blue wizards had vanished into the East's mysteries, their fates unknown. The Astari sent to guide had faltered, and the War of the Ring loomed like a storm, its shadow swallowing hope. Sauron's armies stirred orcs marching from Mordor Nazgul, shrieking in the skies. Frodo and Sam trudged toward Mount Doom the Ring, a chain on their hearts. Aragorn led a fractured fellowship, his sword heavy with doubt. In Minas Tirith, Denethor's despair grew a fire that consumed hope. The world needed a light, a spark to pierce the dark, but Gandalf lay still, his breath gone, his mission unfinished. Yet beyond the veil of the world, in the timeless halls where Eru Ilúvatar the One shaped Arda's song, a gaze fell upon the broken wizard. Gandalf's heart, unyielding in its love for the free peoples, had passed the ultimate test. He had stood alone on the bridge of Khazad Dûm, not for glory, but for those he swore to protect. Frodo, Sam, the hobbits, the men, the elves, the dwarves. His sacrifice was a prayer, a surrender to a design greater than his own. A breath stirred soft as dawn. Light bloomed fierce and pure, a flame that banished the cold. Gandalf awoke no longer, the gray pilgrim, but the white-clad in robes that shimmered like the first snow under sunlight. His staff pulsed with power, its wood warm in his hand. His eyes burned with purpose, sharp as the stars that had watched his fall. Eru had not merely restored him, he had forged him anew, a direct envoy of the One sent to kindle hope where darkness reigned. Gwaihir, the great eagle, soared to the peak, his wings catching the starlight. "Come, Mithrandir," he called his voice, a song of the wind. Gandalf rose, his robes flowing, and Gwaihir bore him from the mountain's embrace down to the green heart of Fangorn forest. The trees whispered their leaves, trembling with awe, for they sensed the change. Gandalf's heart remained unchanged, still beating for the small, the humble, the brave. He thought of Frodo alone with the ring's weight, and of Aragorn leading a fellowship torn by loss. His mission was clearer now, not to dominate, but to guide, to wield power only when mortal hands faltered. In Fangorn's depths he met Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, their eyes wide with awe. Gandalf. Aragorn whispered his sword, lowered his voice thick with hope. "Beyond hope, I return." Gandalf replied, his voice, a melody of light, warm as a hearth fire. Gimli's axe trembled. Legolas's bow dipped. They saw not the gray pilgrim, but a flame, a beacon against the dark. The white wizard's power was veiled, but its edges gleamed sharp as a blade. He rode to Edoras, where Saruman's shadow lay heavy over King Theoden. The hall of Meduseld was dim, its golden beams dulled by despair. Theoden sat hunched, his eyes clouded by Wormtongue's lies. Gandalf stepped forward, his staff glowing not with flame, but with the promise of dawn. "Rise, Rohan," he called, his voice cutting through the gloom. Light flared, and Theoden stood tall, his eyes alight with fire, his heart free. The hall echoed with hope, and Gandalf smiled, knowing the tide was turning. Yet his thoughts turned to Helm's Deep, where Saruman's army marched, a tide of iron and fire. Frodo's journey weighed on him, the ring's pull growing stronger with each step toward Mordor. Gandalf's new power was not in might alone, but in faith, in the belief that small hands could shape great fates. He mounted Shadowfax, the Lord of Horses, and rode across Rohan's plains, the wind carrying a promise. The white flame had risen, and the storm would not prevail. What force could transform a wanderer into a beacon? The answer lay not in Gandalf's power, but in his choice to sacrifice all, to endure the fire, to return as light. The War of the Ring awaited, and with it the true test of the White. As he rode, the horizon glowed a hint of dawn in a world cloaked in shadow. The War of the Ring roared like a tempest, its shadow swallowing Middle-earth in a tide of iron and fire. Gandalf the White rode at its heart, no longer a wanderer, weaving subtle plans but aflame against the dark, his robes gleaming like starlight on snow. In Helm's Deep he descended with the dawn, leading Eomer's riders to shatter Saruman's army. His staff blazed a star fallen to earth, and the orcs fled before him, their cries lost in the horns of Rohan. Theoden stood on the battlements, his heart swelling, his faith in Gandalf unyielding. The victory was hard won. The Deep's walls scarred its defenders, weary. Gandalf walked among them, his voice soft but steady, kindling courage in men whose hands trembled. "The night is long," he said, "but dawn will come." His eyes, though, turned eastward to Frodo and Sam, trudging through Mordor's ash-choked wastes. The ring's weight pulled at their hearts, a chain no sword could break. "I was meant to guide," Gandalf whispered, "and they to endure." His faith in the small, the humble, held firm, a spark kindled long ago in the Shire's green hills. Bilbo's bravery, Frodo's resolve, these were the threads of hope he had woven, now tested in the crucible of war. Gandalf's heart ached for. He could not walk their path, could not bear their burden. Yet he trusted, as he always had, in the strength of hobbits, in the quiet power that defied kings and rings. In Rohan he rallied, Theoden's riders, their horses' hooves a thunder that shook the earth. In Fangorn he enlisted Treebeard's Ents, their roots cracking Isengard's stone. Each act was a spark alight in the gathering storm. In Minas Tirith, as Sauron's armies battered the gates, Gandalf stood as the city's shield. The air was thick with smoke, the sky red with fire. Orcs swarmed their drums, a pulse of doom. Nazgûl shrieked their cries, chilling the blood. Denethor the steward had fallen to madness, his pyre, a symbol of despair. Gandalf moved through the streets, his staff a beacon, his voice rallying men whose hope had frayed. "Hold the line," he called, and soldiers stood their swords steady despite the fear. The Witch King, Lord of the Nazgûl, rode through the broken gate, his presence a chill that froze hearts. His mace gleamed, his laughter a blade, all fled save one, Gandalf astride. Shadowfax faced him, his robes gleaming, his voice steady as stone. "You cannot enter," he said, and the air crackled with power, a light that pushed back the dark. The Witch King laughed, his blade raised, but horns sounded in the distance. Rohan had come, their banners bright against the dawn. Gandalf stepped back, his eyes on Éowyn and Merry, who faced the Nazgûl with trembling courage. The Witch King fell not by his hand, but by theirs, a woman and a hobbit fulfilling a prophecy older than Gondor. Gandalf's heart swelled, for this was his true power, not domination, but kindling courage in others. He had seen the spark in hobbits long ago, in Bilbo's quiet bravery and Frodo's steadfast heart. Now as the White he wove those sparks into a fire that burned against Sauron's shadow. In the Pelennor fields, Gandalf fought his staff a beacon amid the chaos. He halted a Nazgûl's charge, its wings faltering under his light. He rallied, broken men, their eyes finding hope in his presence, yet his heart remained with Frodo, the ring's weight pulling at hope itself. He stood on Minas Tirith's walls, watching the horizon, knowing the war's end lay not in swords, but in a hobbit's choice. His new power shone in moments of crisis, halting the enemy's advance, guiding Aragorn to the paths of the dead, sending Pippin to light the beacons. But his true strength was in trust. The storm raged its fury, shaking Middle-earth's foundations. Gandalf's light endured a promise that even the darkest night could break into dawn. He was no longer the gray pilgrim, weaving plans in the shadows, but the white, a flame that burned brightest when hope seemed lost. His transformation was complete, not in the fire of Moria, but in these moments where he stood as both shield and spark, guiding Middle-earth through its darkest hour. The war was not won. Not yet. Frodo's struggle continued, the ring's malice a shadow on Gandalf's heart. But he trusted, as he always had, in the design that had brought him back. The tempest roared, but the white flame held steady, its light a beacon for all who fought against the dark. The fires of Mount Doom faded, their red glow swallowed by the dawn. Sauron's shadow fell, his tower crumbling into dust, his Nazgûl scattering like ash on the wind. Frodo and Sam, weary but alive, stood on the slopes of the broken mountain, their faces lit by a sun they thought they'd never see. The ring was gone, unmade in the fire from which it came, and Middle-earth was free. Though its scars lingered, fields burned, cities, scarred hearts, heavy with loss. Gandalf the White walked among the victors in Minas Tirith, his robes no longer a beacon of war, but of peace, soft as moonlight. The city's white walls gleamed, its banners fluttering in a breeze that carried the scent of spring. He stood in the court of the fountain where the white tree bloomed anew, its petals a promise of healing. Aragorn knelt before him, his crown, a weight he bore with quiet strength. "Well done, my friend Gandalf," said, his smile warm as the Shire's summer. Aragorn rose, king to wizard man to Maya, and the crowd cheered their voices a song of hope. Gandalf's heart, though, turned to the hobbits. Frodo stood apart, his eyes distant, the ring's shadow lingering in his soul. Sam was beside him, ever faithful, his hand resting on Frodo's shoulder. Merry and Pippin, grown taller in spirit, if not in stature, laughed nearby, their voices a reminder of the Shire's enduring light. Gandalf approached his staff, tapping softly, his eyes gentle. "You carried the flame when all seemed lost," he said to Frodo. "Middle-earth owes you a debt it can never repay." Frodo's smile was faint, his hand clutching Bilbo's old pipe, a relic of simpler days. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. Gandalf shook his head, his laughter soft. "I was but a guide." "Frodo, the strength was yours and Sam's and all who stood against the dark." His words were a balm, but he saw the weariness in Frodo's eyes, the wounds that would not heal in Middle-earth. His task was done. His light now, a guide for others. The Third Age was ending, the time of elves and wizards fading. Gandalf walked the roads of Gondor one last time, his cloak catching the breeze, his heart light but heavy with farewell. At the Grey Havens, under a sky painted with twilight, he boarded a ship with Frodo, Galadriel, Elrond, and Bilbo, their faces serene as they turned west. The sea sang its waves a lullaby, and Gandalf's laughter mingled with the salt air. "I came to kindle hope," he said to Frodo, "and you carried it." The hobbit's eyes glistened, his hand warm in Gandalf's. "Will we see you again?" Frodo asked, his voice small. Gandalf's smile was a star in the dusk, perhaps in another tale beyond the circles of this world. As the ship sailed its sails catching the last light, Middle-earth felt his absence, a quiet ache in its heart. Yet his legacy burned bright in hobbits who faced dragons and kings who rose from despair in a world that endured because of the small, the brave, the true. Gandalf's transformation was no mere change of robe or power. It was a journey from wanderer to sacrifice, from death to rebirth, from guide to beacon. He was Olorin, who loved the small in Valinor's halls, Mithrandir, who walked Middle-earth's wilds, Gandalf, who faced fire in Moria and returned as light Eru's hand had shaped him. But his choices, his faith in hobbits, his stand against shadow, his trust in a design beyond his sight defined him. His story began in the Shire's green hills, where he saw a spark in Bilbo's heart, a hobbit who faced a dragon and found a ring. It burned in Moria's depths, where he stood alone against the Balrog's fire, his cry echoing through the ages. It blazed at Helm's Deep, where dawn broke. Saruman's army, his staff a star in the dark. It shone in Minas Tirith, where he held the line against despair, trusting Éowyn and Merry to slay the Witch King. Each step was a testament to hope, a light that no darkness could quench. What does it mean to carry the light? Gandalf's tale asks us to look within to find the spark that endures, the courage that stands against shadow. Was it his laughter with hobbits in the Shire, his stand in Moria's fire, or his dawn at Helm's Deep that stirred your heart? Share your favorite moment of his journey. Bilbo's quest, Frodo's burden, or the White Rider's charge, and let's keep Middle-earth stories alive. For in every heart that holds hope, Gandalf's flame still burns a beacon for the ages, a light that will never fade.